Hi, my name is Ashish Dharam, and today I am joined by Abdul Koker, and we are the co-hosts of the podcast The Second Curve. And this podcast focuses on the second curve of learning that people often go through in their career, along with stories and experiences that shaped who they are today. And our goal is to take these stories and share them, along with uncovering what the next big thing will be in their industry. So today we're gonna, continue our conversation with Suresh in episode 3. Suresh, how are you doing today?
Doing well. Thanks for having me.
All right. So let's get started with, some more questions on, we wanted so last time we talked about, AI literacy, and now we want to go into skills to build before AI. So a lot of AI is used for coding purposes. So what should people learn from the ground up before using AI to code or develop, and what can be glossed over? So you want to go over like some specific things that could be used for both?
Yeah. So, okay, just to help us frame this conversation, I'm going to be answering from the standpoint of someone that's trying to use code or software to achieve some goal. Okay. And so now you're at the start of your career, you're going to be coding or using software in some way. And your question is, where do I start? What do I avoid? What's meaningful? What isn't? Right. So what is okay, I'll start with what isn't necessarily meaningful. There's no longer a need for you to go into like low level language knowledge. There's no longer a need for you to go deep into understanding algorithms. There's no longer a need for you to even like understand like the nuances of using Python versus C++ or other languages like that. But what is absolutely needed of you is an understanding of the problem that you're going to be building with. So, I guess as more of like a blanket answer, you still want to be learning about the world and how it relates to humans. So let's say I want to, build software for like medical practices, okay? Or, health clinics. And that's like my goal. I want to do software, I want to do health, I want to build in that space. So where do I start? I would actually recommend that you start by learning about the health clinics themselves, not even the code or the software. So, learn about like how do the businesses operate, or a separate type of problem is what type of problems do the patients in these clinics face? How does insurance work? Like there's all these real world kind of aspects that actually mean quite a bit. And that's what I recommend you go in and learn. And it seems counterintuitive, but this is actually what I mean by having like a foundation or understanding of the world. Because once you understand how the people operate and what the problems are, it then becomes very simple to go and prompt AI to build software for that purpose. And in our last interview, we spoke about like the right way of using AI, the order of operations. And I gave an example of how to do that for writing an essay. And it's sort of the same thing here. So, the code is the thing that you go out and generate, but what the code is tasked to do and the important aspects of the code is the real world things like what is a hospital? What does the hospital care about? Who are the people that come into the hospital? How do the finances of the hospital operate? And so the most important thing for you to learn is actually like the real world human elements and forget about the technical elements for right now. Okay, so that's one answer, but if you can entertain me, I'll go a little bit further with that. When you're building with software, there's also a whole set of things around making it production quality or production ready. And that aspect of things absolutely does matter. And so there is work that you can do to learn how to build production quality applications, and that should not be skipped. I'm not suggesting that. But what I'm merely trying to suggest is as a first step, like your goal to build a proper solution is first to understand the problem. Then you can build a solution. And then once you've got like something to work with, it now becomes meaningful for you to learn how to make it production quality and maintainable and secure. So I'm happy to dive into this a little bit more, but that's sort of my complicated answer to this.
Yeah, no, and I think you answered it quite well. I think it gives a clear answer to if I want to do something with code, I don't need to sit. Let's say I want to do something in Python. I don't need to sit through a 6-hour free code camp video on Python syntax. That's no
Yeah.
longer important. I don't need to go through the nuances of Python is slow. I should use C++. It doesn't matter, quite frankly, right now. And I like this kind of problem first approach where it's really like you want to get something out the door and then you can look on iterating it and making it production quality. But if you focus on that from the get-go, you might not even get something.
Yeah, actually, I like what you're saying there. And I think part of that dynamic is we don't know how quickly AI is going to evolve and what strengths it's going to pick up faster. We know it's very capable at coding. And I do believe the next evolution of our models, while I mean, it's hard to say just how much better they will be. I do believe that there will be more infrastructure around like building production quality code. So that side of things will be present for you to leverage. So if we focus on the real world concepts and aspects of the business, that becomes useful regardless of how AI sort of grows and improves. And it's something that we can then leverage. And the other way you can think about this, just another like sort of analogy is, we compared like the best person in the world of AI to a leader or a CEO. So you kind of want to start thinking like them. And, a CEO thinks of problems at like the top level. And then there's an assumption that I'm going to bring on qualified people to manage things at, sub layers below that. And so when you are preparing yourself for this world, it's helpful to try and put that CEO hat on. And I mean, frankly, you can even like communicate with your own AI like this, saying, hey, I want to pick up, executive skills. I want to start to think like an executive, start to plan problems like an executive. And I actually think that's a good strategy for you. And yeah, so, I've given you two examples now, but I think there's no one right answer, but definitely think at a higher level and focus on the real world and let like the coding type stuff, just delegate that to AI as much as you can right now.
Yeah, and if you were, let's say, a student, right? Someone in college, and you're not necessarily building for a business or for profit, and you want to start thinking like a CEO, you want to start addressing problems and breaking them down like a higher level executive. How would you go about that? Would there be any like problems you'd solve for yourself, maybe a family member? I just want to hear your thought process.
Yeah. I mean, hey, like I know sometimes we glorify what a CEO does, but at its core, your job is executive functioning. And this is actually something that we go out of our way to teach. Like this is an important skill set we start teaching kids when they're like 5 years old. It's the ability to make decisions for themselves towards like their betterment. So to answer your question, I think the best approach is to pick a type of problem. It can be personal or it can be in the real world. And then you use AI alongside yourself to target and solve that problem. And so, it could be something as simple as, hey, like I want to lose 50 pounds, or it could be something as complex as it's like, hey, I want to identify like the hardest problem that like my local government deals with. And I want to be like an active player in helping them solve it. Right. So pick any problem of any size, make sure it's part of the real world. Like no more of these like artificial problems. It's just not worth it anymore. Find something in the real world as it applies to you or a business or, the government, and just go out there, trial and error, use AI, learn that industry as you're doing it, and pick up those like executive skills where you're operating at a higher level. And again, it's not to mean that this is like a more like important role in society. It's just to say that when we have AI all over the place, whether it be agents or just intelligence that we're leveraging, in some ways we are the executive function for that intelligence. So it's helpful to pick up and really harden these types of skills, and they'll pay off more.
Yeah, I really like that. The way you say like how to think of like a CEO, different steps you used to do. Do you have any specific stories or like instances where you've tried to do that before? You got to this role,
Yeah,
or like
yeah. I mean, hey, like so, again, this CEOs are leaders and problem solvers, like in the same envelope. So I think like the earliest instances I've had of this type of work would be like in high school when I was, be leading a club or an organization. So I used to be part of robotics and Model UN. And you can very much think of that role where you're a leader and solving a problem. And that's where you want to practice these executive functioning skills. So there's a few core elements to it. There's like a problem that you're trying to optimize. There's like a team of people that you're managing. There's like some level of accountability where you are the person that has to at the end of the day look at like what have we solved, what have we not solved, and what is working and what is not working. I think for me, like robotics was like an early form of that. We were competing as a team, so we figure out like, hey, like who in our org is most capable of solving what types of problems. And that's a type of thing for us to think about. And then as we start solving a problem, there's a whole thing about evaluating how we're doing and then redirecting us to another approach. And these things, they seem so simple and normal, and they are. But what I'm suggesting is you just make this the priority and don't worry about the flashy things going on around you. So types of skills that you could pick up is if you're in high school and you're part of a club or org, or if you're part of a sports team, or I don't know, if you're working on a research project, you focus in on like, what have you studied? What did you learn? What is the problem you're trying to solve? What elements of that were you able to improve? And then you want to sort of think of end to end, like, what did I do with this thing? Yeah, I mean, if you guys have an example of a place in your life that you spend some time, I could probably structure it a little bit more clearly. But yeah, it's already happening. It's just paying more attention to it. That's really the answer. Okay, so you guys, you had this idea where you wanted to go and learn about people that are on like the second curve of their career. So at that point, that is actually the problem. You've already decided like, hey, there's something here that we're learning that people are pivoting in their careers. We want to gain more information and we want to communicate it to people, right? That was the problem. And then you guys decided that, hey, like, we're going to work together on this. We're going to divide up tasks. I'm going to prioritize, getting new clients or getting new people to interview. I'm going to prioritize, the content. And you're both are literally sharing executive tasks as you build this thing out. But the key part is you're not just like doing this as like an assignment, right? It's not like just to check off like a grade or something. You actually have an end goal and you're continuing to iterate and update what you're doing towards that, right? So whether it be growing a following or to optimize the people that you interview, you guys are making specific decisions towards those goals. So that's what I kind of mean. It's like, it's a really subtle thing, but I'm saying go find a problem or a thing that's meaningful enough to you and stick at that thing and continue to iterate and do it in different ways and interact with people and build a team towards that end goal. And that is like the best skill that you can develop right now. Does that make a little more sense?
I think that's a great way of looking at it, and that kind of opened my eyes to like I was doing this and I didn't realize it.
Yeah, you are.
And I really like the comparison of it's not an assignment. It's something that you actually want to go do, solve. And it reminded me, the way you're talking about this, it reminded me of right now. I mean, it's the summer before college admissions, right? And a lot of people might view it as an assignment, but it's possible to view it as like a means to an end, as a problem you need to solve. Like, I need to sell myself to XYZ University and prove to them, whatever admissions officer, that I am the best applicant. And then I can work backwards from there, right? Like, for the admissions officer, it would be great if I am the best possible applicant. They admit me on the spot. So what can I do? What values can I show in my essay? And it takes it from being, I have to fill out my activity section, to, this is something that I can iterate on. This is a chance for me to show who I really am and, maybe propel my education and higher education if that's your certain goal. Somebody else's goal could not be getting into, let's say, an Ivy League, but they want to get as much scholarship as possible, right? Mm-hmm. And then you're going to keep iterating on it where, okay, do I want to stay in state? Do I want to go out here? Do I want to apply to big scholarships, smaller scholarships? And you start like being that executive, even if what you're controlling is like your own life. You get to be like the decider of things and the problem solver. One thing I've noticed across many people we've interviewed, one of the crucial skills, I love to hear your thoughts on this, but taking a large problem, breaking it up into smaller tasks, and then getting those small wins.
Right. No, that's absolutely critical, right? Like that is, one of the major roles of anyone in an executive role. It's breaking things down, helping a team accomplish it, and then also directing people around challenges to where you're trying to go. The one thing I will say is I would say that if you want to like execute effectively, one of the aspects that I believe is important is feedback. So in businesses, feedback is simple. It's like, what's your revenue? What are your customers? What I would say is with college, feedback is painfully slow because you really don't always get it like until like, acceptance day. Not to say that you can't apply, executive functioning tactics or skills towards getting into college. Absolutely. That is a great problem to work on. But what I'm more getting at is like, I think to develop a proper skill set, you want to have a problem that there's something about it you can measure. And then you're iterating around that and you can actually observe how it's changing. And we speak about this in vague terms. The reason why is because you can apply this to any sort of problem and then use AI to help you, right? So like, for example, let's take software engineering. Instead of like just building like a portfolio of applications, because honestly, anyone can go sit behind Claude and come up with 10 prompts, send it, and have 10 apps and have a portfolio. I actually recommend you do the opposite. You go and look for people that actually need something. Go find a school, go find a club, go find like, I don't know, a small business or a family friend that actually has people or a group of people that need something. It could even be like a community group or a prayer, it could be anything. Find that first and then help them complete their problem where you've got some layer of like measurability and feedback. And that is going to give you the best like playground to practice these executive skills. Now, for example, let's say you're doing something around marketing. Again, like I think marketing is a little bit easier in this case, in the sense that if your goal is a certain number of impressions or a certain following, that's very measurable. So, go out, pick a topic, execute towards that goal, and keep iterating over and over again with the help of AI towards that goal. And this is the skill set that I think is most important in this, in the AI era and for getting started. Yeah.
Yeah, I really like that. And I wanted to talk about like especially marketing sales, because you mentioned marketing at the end, and like how should like one person, especially if like I'm in college or I'm starting out as like an intern, like how should people like approach like day-to-day tasks with AI, and like what foundations do you want to have before? Like I think you already like talked about this, but like could you expand more, especially in like marketing, sales, design, and like different types of jobs that are like more prevalent to today's society?
Yeah. So I'm happy to give my answer, but I do want to preface by saying I'm by no means an expert in marketing or some of these other disciplines, but I'm happy to share like my perspective on this. So again, like, I think that most of these fields will exist, but with AI, there's just a higher expectation of what you're going to produce. And the sort of initial naive thought is like, oh, the expectation is just produce more of that thing. So if I was like in a marketing role, now I just need to produce more marketing content or more marketing campaigns. I say that's naive because I think it's a simplification of what people want. I think what people actually want is more breadth. So like if you were to be a marketing role, or before if it was a marketing role, now it's probably like product marketing and some business where you've got more visibility and then you're also doing more. So if you're in college or high school and you feel that marketing is your calling, you're thinking, where do I start? Where do I start? I quite frankly say you find a cause that you can go out and market for. And then you go through the trial and error of learning how to market this thing, what works, what doesn't work, just like you both are doing with this podcast. The truth is like I can give you small like bits of information about things that I've learned for marketing that work well. But the reality is this society is also changing really quickly. So the things that like used to work don't really work anymore, and you got to keep pivoting. So that's why I think it's just important that you find a meaningful problem to go and experiment with, and then make sure fundamentally whatever you're doing, you are using AI in some way. So, and now I can enumerate a few things. It's really easy to create scripts or content with AI. That's the tech side. But it's actually also quite easy to create like really high quality visuals or even videos. So like if you wanted to go and browse sort of just like marketing with AI, I know it can almost feel overwhelming, but there are all these like videos on YouTube about how you can like create a prompt, plug it into like video or prompts to video models like Dance from China, make these really beautiful videos, and then you can post them, on social media, TikTok, Instagram, and that's like one type of, customer acquisition and marketing. But the thing is like marketing itself is such a wide field, just like computer science, that you don't want to reduce it. You want to have a problem that has meaning and context, and then learn the skills that are relevant towards that. Yeah. So again, I can go a little bit further in my explanation, but it's really just about finding a meaningful problem, and that's the more important part. And then you'll learn what you need for that problem.
Yeah, and I like this approach. I think that it solves a critical pitfall that a lot of people have fell into in the last couple of years. Is you have a startup and you have this solution, however, nobody has the problem. There's so many. I've seen this joke so many times that like Y Combinator companies are solving problem. Like they'll make the solution, and then they make the problem. So the biggest pitfall being that, hey, nobody actually had this problem. You solved it for what? Instead of spending so much time preparing for like almost general solutions or solutions that you're not sure if people have the problem, maybe they've already been solved. You go and take a problem and then you hyper focus on that, and you learn everything related to that. Not even just in like the technical area, but all the nuances of that problem in specific. I wanted to hear your thoughts on how exactly should you take and implement feedback. Like there's many different types of feedback. We talked about analytics. If you're posting content or marketing, how would you recommend somebody go about feedback and not implementing it only in whatever service or product you made, but also in the way you approach problems?
I just want to add one more detail. Like the highest level of education is like the doctorate. And if you guys look at what a doctorate really is, it's someone that has focused on one problem, studied it end to end, either came up with a solution or some sort of analysis of it, and then defended it. And people that have PhDs, when they go out to the workforce, I mean, some segment of them go out and do something very similar to what they studied. But the reality is people then look at that PhD or that doctoral candidate and see, This is someone who can study a very complicated problem, break it down, come up with the solution, attempt to solve it, present it, defend it. And that's actually the meaningful asset that comes out of your doctoral degree. It's not really the research, it's the process of going through that for a specific problem. So that's what I wanted to leave you with. It's like the skill set that actually matters is like working towards some outcome, studying that problem in depth, breaking it down, and then trying to solve and iterate towards a solution for that problem. So now the feedback question. Okay, so there's a few levels to this. Feedback is crucial, and feedback is like one of our senses. So you need feedback, but feedback is a tough thing because you can get it from a number of different sources. They come with varying levels of credibility. And then there's also the question about, do you accept and use all feedback? There's a whole range of things that I want to discuss here. At its core, what I would say is that when you're earlier in your career, you do want to leverage and rely on feedback more. I think that's rather important, actually. Like you're still building up your own sense of direction and like what you know and what you don't know. And so rather than just like being gung ho to what you know, I think it's helpful to hunt out feedback and accept it. But the thing that is important is you don't want to go off just one or two bits of feedback. You want to get a wide variety of feedback and then come to your own conclusion about, a next step or modification. So for example, let's say you're writing a college essay. You could go and get one person's, opinion on your essay, and it may or may not be productive, but now you've got one set of feedback. So if that's all you have, your choice is, do I take this feedback or not? What I actually recommend is you go out and you try to get like 10 people's opinions. So now you've got a whole sample of feedback. And then based off that sample, now you make a decision which feedback seems more relevant to you. This is important because just because someone of a more experienced role or someone that may appear more accomplished in a certain area gives you feedback, it does not necessarily mean it is the right feedback for you. And that's also a hard thing to accept because, like at the end of the day, you're just trying to find like the most optimal outcome for yourself. And so sometimes we want to just trust what other people say and think that that's the right path. But the reality is it's not that black and white. You're going to have to keep making decisions and adjusting where you're going to. So number one, I would say for feedback is you want some volume. You want like a range of feedback so that you can then come to a decision about what matters. So then the next thing I would say is if you're building a company, so now we're not just talking about yourself, I recommend you have like strong feedback mechanisms as part of your business. So let's say you're building a software application. I would recommend that you build in ways for customers to give you feedback. Like maybe it's a WhatsApp group, maybe it's like an iMessage chat or a community. Don't just leave it up to them to like send you an email or tell you when something is broken. Be more proactive about going out and hunting that feedback. And what you'll find when you go out and do this is there will be certain individuals that provide you like meaningful and useful feedback, and there'll be others that provide you like generic and not so useful feedback. So an example is like I can use a health and fitness app. Someone may come up and say, yeah, this thing just isn't really working for me. I'm not, I don't find any meaning in it. And okay, that's some feedback, but that's really hard to, there's not much that's actionable there. Another type of feedback you may get is, hey, like, I plan all my meals on Sunday. It would be really like impactful or powerful for me if like there was a way for me to see my whole week's worth of nutrition in one go. Okay. So that type of feedback is like really clear and actionable. The other one that was just like, this isn't working for me, doesn't give you anything to run with. So what I've found in my own career is it's helpful to go and hunt for the people that give meaningful feedback, and it just makes it way easier for you to do something with it. Yeah, that's one. The second thing I would say is that there's no need to defend when you're getting feedback. This is a hard thing that I see. I mean, even I've struggled with this, but it's like a reflex. Whether it be feedback for you personally or feedback for your company, a lot of times the first instinct is to say like a counter argument to sort of pad it or make it be like, oh, that's not as bad. And the thing is you making that statement doesn't actually change anything. Like that person's going out of their way to give you feedback. So in this example of the app saying, hey, I'm struggling to plan my week's set of meals, right? That's the feedback. If my response is like, I don't get why you're struggling, like you can just do it in this way. Is this really that much harder? Like if that was my response back to someone, I am robbing myself of the opportunity to understand their problem. That's one. And the second thing is when you look defensive, people then look at you being like, you're like not listening to me, you're not hearing out what I'm trying to express, and that will also cut them off. So to receive feedback, you want to, you know, allow it to come in. There's no need to defend. I actually recommend you take a different posture, which is you try to understand, you try to get in their mindset. And, you know, I'm not saying that you are going to understand or that it will be meaningful feedback, but in the best scenario, you're now able to empathize with that person who gave you that feedback, which is going to make you more capable of solving that problem or improving the experience for them.
Was you want a lot of feedback, as much as you can get. Try and as a result of that, you're going to be able to find both good, meaningful, and maybe more generic feedback. And I like the example of only having one person look at your essay. They could be as qualified as ever, but having one data point, if anybody's ever done data analysis, you know that doesn't mean anything in context. This could have been the best or worst advice you've ever got. So if you get a more volume, you're able to really see where each one falls on the range. And then the third thing that you gave, which I think, especially if you've worked on something quite hard, it is difficult, but not being defensive. And you're so right. It's such a reflex of, you know, if you can't, if you don't need to see all your calories in 1 week, just add them all up, right? Like just do the mental math or something. But you're failing to see that this person had a problem that you can then go and solve. Like it's a learning opportunity for you and to understand how your customers use your product. A lot of the time, not even just any product, but I think sometimes it's good to see other people's perspectives on things because your way of using things is oftentimes different from somebody else's. For you, some button placement might be very natural because maybe that's the UI you're used to, but for somebody else, they're going to be like, this is hidden. I wasn't able to find it. Instead of saying, why couldn't you find it? You maybe want to try and empathize and understand, like, you know, what could I do to make this better and make it easier for people? Yeah. But if you want to go more into feedback, maybe even giving feedback, that could also be an interesting thing.
It's also important to just recognize that you will never be able to appease 100% of a certain user base or, you know, a group of people that, you know, are providing you feedback. So that what I mean to say is, and it's also not to say that you should appease the largest, you know, population of people either. It's just to say that you make your choices with understanding of who it will alienate and who it won't. And that's okay, right? So I think one of the best examples of this is actually like Google, right? So Google has this really clean UI and interface, and it works really well in the US. But the thing is Google, for many reasons, didn't do so well out in China. But one of like the user behaviors was actually because in China at that time, people wanted to click on links and have it be a new tab, something super small. And literally that one like UI decision about behavior of the app changed how that demographic of people wanted to use that app. And so what I'm getting at is on one hand, we could say, hey, you know, there's a large population here in the US. This is something that works really well for them. We've gotten the feedback. The majority of people like this interface, so do it. But the reality is okay, in a different place, a different choice makes a little bit more sense. And so we have to apply like our judgment and discernment. So it's not black and white. It'll never be perfect. You can't appease everyone. But you can make those executive decisions based off the information that comes in. And that's, you know, the goal of feedback. Okay, so thank you for letting me elaborate on that. Now let's talking about effective ways of giving it. So for me, feedback is actually like a really straightforward thing. I'm not saying this applies to everyone else. To me, like if I'm giving someone feedback, it should be specific and it should be actionable. That's the way I think of it. So if like I'm going to go out of my way to tell someone like, hey, this doesn't make sense, or hey, this is hurting me, or hey, like, I think this can be done better. I don't just say like, oh, this can be done better. I will make sure it's specific. Like, hey, in our meetings, this type of language does not seem to be producing like a collaborative environment. So that's like specific. I'm being very specific about what I'm giving them feedback on. And then I want to make it actionable. So I want to both invite them and give them potentially a way of improving it. So like I personally have seen how like X, Y, and Z can make a difference, but you know, I leave it open to you to see if there's like other things that work well for you. And so this thing where it's specific and actionable to me is actually all that's needed for feedback, because it gives the recipient enough information so that they don't get lost and think like, oh, I'm like a terrible communicator, or oh, like I can't do this role. No, it's just specific to like this type of communication in a meeting. And the second thing is it helps them see a path to improvement, right? So like if I'm giving you feedback, it's because like ultimately I want like this group of people or my team or my business to improve. It doesn't matter to me if you feel the weight of like the mistake you made. I just want you to want to find a way to improve this. Okay. But now, not everyone receives feedback in the best way. And that is just something that's not in your control. So you'll get different opinions on that side of it about how to help someone receive it. I think, at the end of the day, if someone doesn't want feedback, they're probably not going to receive it well, regardless of how well you say it. So the thing that people, and I do believe in this, is like, you don't just dive into it unsolicited. You first prompt like, hey, can I give you some feedback? Hey, do you have 5 minutes to talk about this? And you let them be part of that decision so that when you start speaking, they're already like in a mindset to want to listen or want to hear. And again, you can't really control how people will receive what you say. And sometimes they will also misunderstand you. And so it's not to say that that's your fault, but you can do your best to make sure people are in a frame of mind to receive it and then give them something specific and actionable. So yeah, that's my feedback on feedback.
Yeah, that was really, really interesting. I like the way you answered it and also put that, question into perspective. But I want to ask like two questions. I guess that'd be similar. What's the most effective way you think like approaching feedback would be? Like in your perspective, what do you think is the most effective way? And also, how do you think AI could be implemented in?
Yeah, no, that's actually a really cool question. So people tend to not get as aggressive or defensive around AI, which is just absolutely amazing and perplexing at the same time. So you can just think of yourself, right? Like if you went and ask AI, like, hey, what do you think I'm doing wrong here? And if it gives you an answer, you don't take any offense. You'll be like, okay, I'll think about it. But if you did that same thing to a friend or a parent and they give you an answer, like you would take offense. So I really like that question because this is a pattern that we're seeing more now, where there are systems that are in companies where the feedback is automatically given by AI systems. So there may be people where like they're trying to improve the amount that they participate. And I've actually seen this in some schools. And so in these school environments, like now there's AI that's monitoring and will give feedback to the student directly. It's coming from the AI, not from the parents or from the teacher. And it can be more like it tends to be more well received for one reason or another. So I guess like getting into that, I think that's just human nature. We have like our walls are lower when we're dealing with something that, I don't know, we can't relate to as much. I don't know the psychology behind that. But what I can say is I do think AI is a really important vehicle for feedback, both giving and receiving. And I think I'll put myself in like a student's position for this. I think one way that a student can view it is having like a personal chat or agent that you have an ongoing conversation with it about a certain thing that you're trying to improve with. So you kind of just think of this as like your feedback vehicle. So, for you both, maybe you're trying to gain, you want more feedback as to like the questions that you're asking in these interviews, right? So you can take these transcripts and keep feeding it into your AI engine and have it continue to pump out potential feedback or questions for you to consider, right? That's like one simple mechanism to constantly be improving on your own. And then when you get into like a college or university, you can apply that same thing to like group or team dynamics or, your progression in a certain difficult class. Yeah, you definitely don't need to overthink it. It's just as simple as let something observe what you're doing, let it give you potential weaknesses or strengths, and then you go out and update what you're doing and then observe, the result of that, right? Does that answer your question, Ashrit?
Yeah,
Okay.
very well, very
Cool.
nicely said.
Cool.
But yeah, I like the conversation we had today about feedback and also like skills that are effective for building like having a foundation before using AI and how that turns into like feedback. So Abdullah, do you have any other thoughts you want to add before we close this episode up?
I actually wanted to open it up to Suresh. If you have any other,
I got
I know you have something.
Yeah,
Yeah,
So you want to leave
you guys-
us off with something?
yeah,
Yeah,
I'd love to hear.
I will. So this is the thing I'll leave you with to think about. If you're, no matter what field or discipline you want to prepare yourself in this world of AI, you are going to have this intelligent partner, which is artificial intelligence. But the one thing that is going to differ between each person is the resources that each of us bring. So the resources could be money, it could be capital, it could be our reach. So people that are in our community or followers. And then there's also that domain knowledge. So your understanding of problems that other people just don't have by default. So what I'm getting at is regardless of marketing, computer science, engineering, I don't know, medicine, law, whatever it may be, focus on that layer of like, what are my resources? Who do I know? Who's my following, or who are my connections? And that gives you the most strength as AI progresses, in addition to just understanding the problems that people face. Yeah. So what you guys are doing
And
is absolutely phenomenal. That's what
Thank you.
yeah, appreciate it. But yeah, I think that's a great thing to just leave off on, that everybody brings something else to the table. And, there's always unique ways. Like, everybody has the same tool, but we all use it differently. And we can always, have that constant feedback and that loop of improvement.
Yeah.
But yeah, thanks for hopping on today and having a nice talk about feedback. And
And we're excited for the next one.
Yeah, same here.
Yeah.
Always a pleasure.
all right.
All right. Thank you.
Take care.